Well guys, here we are with a brand new, future-proof budget gaming PC build for the high end with all brand new components that any single one of you, wherever you are in the world, can build. Because here on the channel we usually bring builds with one-off deals which are very hard to replicate. It's part of the channel, it's what makes those builds great. I do give advice for you guys to replicate, but they are not easy to copy. But this one you can just buy everything and build it for yourself, and it's gonna be the best value for money on the high end. The budget for today's build is gonna be anywhere from 2,000 to 2,500 euros if you build it yourself and if you buy the components on discount. Now, why the best value for money and why future-proof? Well, let's get over the components. Best value for money because we are buying what, in my opinion, is the best value for money RTX 4000 series GPU, which is the 4070 Ti. Now, this thing beats the RTX 3090 and does so while being extremely power efficient. We have covered this in the past in the Silence build, and this thing was drawing like 300 watts under full load. Crazy good. Same can be said for the Ryzen 7 7700X, which is going to be at the core of today's build. You don't really need the X3D chips unless you're pushing extremely high frame rates, like over 240 Hz, which is probably not going to be the case with a 4070 Ti. So the 7700X is actually going to be plenty for most people. And the beauty of this CPU is you don't need an expensive motherboard at all. What we have here today is a Gigabyte B650 Gaming X AX, so with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and these are all relatively cheap parts which can be had easily. The Ryzen 7 also doesn't draw too much power and doesn't require too much cooling, so that's also a plus. So you're probably wondering, why did I buy this power supply and this cooler? But first, let's actually talk about storage and memory. So pretty simple. What we have here is some Patriot Viper Elite 48GB kits, because now they make 2x24GB DRAM kits because they are just cheaper to produce and they can ask a bit more money. Understandable. 6000 MHz because you don't want more than 6000 MHz on Ryzen. DDR5 RAM, and for the storage compartment we're going with Crucial, which is a big brand which I really like. Good value for money, but most importantly super reliable. And we have their new T500, which is the little brother to the T700, which we've covered on the channel in the past. So with that said, let's actually talk about what makes this build future-proof, which is the power supply, the cooler, and the case. Now, the power supply is the latest FSP Hydro PTM Pro, and now this is their 80 Plus Platinum revision. So we have covered the FSP Hydro G in another one of our budget builds on the channel before, but this one is 80 Plus Platinum, and it is obviously PCIe Gen 5 ready, ATX 3.0 compatible, so you will have the 12-volt high power cable directly for your GPU, which is great, especially if you want to upgrade to a 4090 or maybe a 5090 in the future, if it makes sense. So that's why we've gotten quite a bigger power supply. But if you want to save money, you can just buy this combo and then just get a 750 watts 80 plus gold power supply from a good brand, and it's actually going to be plenty fine. Now, the cooler, I think you haven't really seen budget builds with 420mm all-in-one water coolers. So this Arctic unit is actually the best water cooler in the market, and I'm not saying best value for money, I'm just saying straight out the best on the market, because the cooler has a little fan on the water block which also cools your VRM a little bit. Now that's not gonna make a huge difference, but we also have that, and these Arctic fans are just crazy good. I have covered them in the past on the channel. I have them in my main build. They are the best fan on the market. They're P12 ARGB fans. They also look very nicely in my opinion. For all of that, we needed a case which could accommodate a 420mm all-in-one water cooler, and there really aren't a lot out there. So what we've gotten here is the Antec Performance One FT. It's a massive case, full aluminum, fully meshed, 420mm AIO compatible on the front, and it just has it all. 360 on top, massive space for GPUs. You can put a 4090 in there, you can put the bigger GPU in existence in there, even 2 GPUs, and it will still work fine, and it has a massive airflow. But let's not spoil too much about the build. Without further ado, I say we just get building and we start installing everything on top of the motherboard.
Perfect.
Now, obviously, they sell you this with the heatsink as well if needed, but since our motherboard already has a pretty good heatsink, there is just no point for buying the heatsinked one, if it makes sense. Okay, so at this point we have everything on the motherboard ready, CPU installed, RAM installed, SSD installed, and I think it's already starting to look nice, by the way. So it is time to go ahead and install our massive triangular boxed all-in-one water cooler from Arctic. Massive cooler. So under all of this, there should be a massive radiator. No guys, you have no idea how big this thing is. It is just too big, for real. Guys, wait. Like this is our 4070 Ti box, and this is our cooler. This thing is just massive. And it's all pre-installed for you, which I really like. So they give us some MX5, they now have the MX6 out, but this is what they give you with the cooler. And all the hardware, so I say we go ahead and get it strapped to the motherboard. Now here I am with the manual, and there is something very interesting about this Arctic Liquid Freezer 2. So basically AMD has something which is called offset install, which is basically made to optimize the cooler for the hotspots of the Ryzen 7000 CPUs. To do that, you basically have to use, as you can see here, those holes. So you mount this in the right direction with this on top, this one on the bottom, and then you use the bottom holes for both. And this allows you for like optimum compatibility. So now I will show you how I mount it. So as you can see, we're using the ones towards the top to use the offset mount. Now with everything ready, we can just apply the paste and slap the cooler on top. Make sure you peel the sticker off, guys. I've seen this too many times. And you want the fan facing the VRM of your motherboard. So in this case, just straight on top. Another good thing about Arctic coolers is they just have two cables. One, you just connect it to the CPU fan, not CPU OPT, because it's not the pump, it is just the whole cooler. And the other one, you basically connect it to the 3-pin RGB connector. Now at this point, we basically have the build ready. What we would have to do is to just open up the case and slot everything in. However, it is good practice to first test out your hardware. So now we're going to do just that and just set up a quick test bench and see if we get a signal out of all of this. Now, for the purpose of our test bench, we need to unbox this Gigabyte RTX 4070 Ti. Now, I have been liking other models from Gigabyte quite a bit. As you know, I've used the Aero in my personal gaming PC for a while, so now let's see. We have the adapter, which we won't need because we have a good power supply. We have the anti-sag bracket, about which we have a full video on the channel in case you're interested. And then we have our actual card. Now let me tell you, this is much smaller than the Aero, and it also feels slightly less premium. But it's still a very good card, at least it looks like. It is a bit plasticky, really, if I have to critique it, but it's not bad at all. The only thing missing for our test bench is our power supply, so let's do a quick unboxing of this one as well. And here is our unit. What's crazy is it is actually relatively small as well. It's not a massive power supply, but it has a massive capacity and crazy good efficiency. Now this unit is so small, it can also fit in SFF builds. Now it is a modular power supply, so we have to see what cables we want. Now they also give you some cable ties and a self-tester for the PSU, as well as some screws. Many stickers for the PTM X Pro, but we are interested in the cabling. Very nice power cable as well. And the cabling is just overall premium. Now all we need for this kind of build is a 24-pin, 8+4 CPU pin, and our 12-volt high power cable. Okay, so now obviously we do not cable manage, and with a pair of scissors we just short the pin out and we see if we actually get a signal. But first, turn our PSU on. Okay, it's turning on, it's running. I don't see LEDs yet. Now let's see if we actually boot and get into the BIOS, giving us an error code, DRAM code, okay, because sometimes motherboards don't like certain DRAM kits. This is especially true for Ryzen. Okay, so it is not in fact booting, which means we have an issue with the compatibility between our motherboard and our RAM. Now our RAM is AMD EXPO compatible, so this should not happen, but it is clearly dependent on the actual motherboard itself. Sometimes a BIOS updates fix this. To be honest, if it doesn't boot, it rarely fixes it, but we will try. Okay, so we are trying a different RAM stick, and it's giving us the same problem. Things are not going well, guys. I will come back with a solution, hopefully. Okay, I eventually managed to fix it, and everything is working flawlessly, but we had to flash the BIOS manually with a programmer, old school, so this was actually not really fun, but hey, at least we can move forward with installing everything into the case. Okay, so with the build testament ready, it's time to open up the case. Massive case, double-sided tempered glass, so I have to do a good job at cable managing, but what's truly crazy is the fully meshed front panel as well as the LED screen on the top. Okay, so step one is to put all this tempered glass in a safe spot. Oh, and the opening is also very cool, and it's very heavy, it's Asha glass. They thought about me because they put all this cover for the cable management on the back, so even if I do a relatively bad job, nobody would know. Okay, so this one comes out easily as well, and this is just basically transparent screen, and the actual LCD is here. This is a very good design because it would have been a mess to take out this thing, and it's also a two-piece mesh, which is also very cool. Now the case comes with 4 pre-installed fans, 3 140 on the front and 1 120 on the back, but unfortunately, or fortunately depending on how you see it, for our build we need to take them all off because we're going full Arctic. We are putting an RGB 120 on the back, 3 RGB 120 on the top, and then a nice 3 140 at the front, the one from the all-in-one radiator. So I say we get this mounting. Now, there is a tiny hard disk bay here, but we have to take this off because the Arctic radiator has extra thickness and it wouldn't fit in here, so it is absolutely crucial to take this out for ease of installment. Now, another thing that really screams premium is just what they give you in the accessory box. I mean, aside from the manual, which is obviously nice, and a few zip ties and fan splitters, they give you a whole Antec themed screw holder, which is super useful. Okay, so it is finally time to slot in the motherboard. And we have so much space that it's actually relatively easy. We will then have to spend a bit of more time on the all-in-one because we have to detach all the screws, unfortunately. But let's go ahead and screw the motherboard in place. Okay, so with the motherboard in, all that we have to do is just, and again, just with quotation marks, rotate these fans, put them outside, put the radiator in, put the GPU in, put the power supply in, connect all the cables, and then we will be finally done. So let's go ahead with the all-in-one. Okay, so the all-in-one is now mounted. Now, we'll connect a few of the case cabling, obviously, and then we'll go ahead and install these brackets to hold the GPU. We now have all the fans installed, and now the coolest thing is that with Arctic fans you can just daisy chain them all. So we have them all set to run at the same speed, obviously just the case fans because I don't want the all-in-one fans to run at the same speed, and then we have them all connected with the RGB to the all-in-one as well. Okay, so we now have installed basically the support. Again, I have a video on the channel about the details of it, and we have it on our GPU as well. So it is finally time to slot in our graphic card. So let me just take off these brackets here from the case and let's go ahead and get it installed. Okay, so the only thing left at this point is slotting the power supply in. Now, this case has a bracket for the PSU, so now we just lock this on our power supply and then plug it in. And after connecting all the cables, the PC is finally finished. So it's just a matter of putting back all the cabling, maybe cable managing it a bit better, and then closing everything up. Now we'll show you how it is at the front and how it is at the back before the cable management. Now I will show it to you after the cable management. So now with a bit of cable management, it's already looking better, but now we will put all the panels on and really make it look clean. Let's do a nice back panel peel off. Okay, so time for the first boot. Let's actually see if we get a signal. That's a good start. I think it's booting because the fans stopped. Yes. Well guys, here we are with the build fully finished, and I have to say it is looking absolutely stunning. Now yes, I am saying it to myself, but I have to say that the Antec Performance 1FT really makes these Arctic fans shine through the front mesh, and also I think the aluminum grille really complements the looks of it. The interior as well, I like how spacious it is. Now if you've been following the channel for a while, you know I like to do mini ITX very compact builds as well. We've also covered a 3D printed ITX case, by the way, on the channel. But this time, with this very big build, again, this case can support up to e-atx motherboards of the biggest out there. And with a 420mm all-in-one water cooler, I think it looks absolutely stunning. I like how the Viper RAM looks. Now, of course, we have covered that in our RTX 3090, a $45 case video. But I do think these 48GB kit, 6000 MHz are great. Now, they did cause us some trouble. It wasn't easy to get them working, but that's just the motherboard's fault, to be honest. And if you're putting them on Intel, you're gonna have much less issues. However, still talking about the aesthetic, again, the Arctic Liquid Freezer 2. Now, some people like it, some people don't like it. I personally absolutely love the look of it. I like how there is a tiny fan just cooling your VRMs all the time. And so all in all, I like it. I also like the flat black cables of the FSP Hydro PTM Pro PSU. Personally, I think they complement the build nicely. And one of the most unique features of the case as well has to be the top LCD screen. Now you will have to download the Antec app for that, but it's actually a pretty cool app. Allows you to monitor your CPU and GPU, and with the button on the case you can just switch to toggle what you're seeing and what you're not seeing on the actual LCD screen. Now another little touch on the case, well, aside from again all the filters which were really nice, but they even had protective plastic on the USBs on top, much like GPUs have. That's actually a touch of premium, which goes to show the attention to details that Antec puts in their cases, honestly, and I really liked it. And the same can be said about the back. Again, having a glass back is very risky, but I think with those metal shields, we actually managed to build a very good looking case even from the back. But you will be the judge of that, so do let me know down in the comments if my cable management skills are decent and if I should work on them. Enough for the looks, let's focus on what you guys care about, which is performance. So we have tested an array of synthetic benchmarks as well as games. Let's start from the synthetics. Now, first off, these Ryzen CPUs, they do overheat all the time, okay? People say Intel CPUs run too high in temps. Well, Ryzen do as well. Sure, it's by design, but they run too hot. However, not with this cooler. So having the CPU with the power limits fully unlocked, stock settings fully unlocked, we reached a maximum of 86 degrees in Prime 95 on the hottest core, which means our CPU is just not throttling at all, and it is actually one of the few times in which you don't need to undervolt. But if you're running a Ryzen 7000 CPU with any other cooling, I do recommend you my undervolting playlist. I have a tutorial for every single one of those CPUs out there. But in this case, it wasn't needed. Even in Firestrike, the CPU was running cool, and it did so while delivering an absolutely massive score. As you can see, just the whole score, because the GPU as well is insane. This is better than what 5,000 euros worth of PC would have gotten you just 2 years ago with an i9 11900K and a 3090. And remember, in just 2 years' time, this is a mid-range, mid to high-range build. Same can be said for CPU-Z, in which, aside from the specs of the system, I also wanted to show you guys the comparison between this and the i9 11900K. Again, the 11900K does around 660 points in single thread, but this one does 750, which is absolutely crazy. Now, obviously, yes, we have 6000 MHz RAM, we have everything enabled, but it's still absolutely impressive. And the same I can say for the Crucial T500 NVMe SSD. This one, again, over-delivers, doing 7300 megabytes in Crystal Disk Mark, and just all the reads just consistent and stable, which is actually the difference between a branded SSD and one of these cheap SSDs which will drop over time. Let's talk about gaming. Now, this combo is crazy. Now, I do have talked about it in the past as well. Even with the 3090, it is actually the same target of performance, really, but it is the sweet spot, in my opinion, at the moment for value for money on the high end, as I've discussed previously as well. But testing out Apex, we were able to lock out just the 300 FPS pretty much all the time. Even in landing, I really didn't see less than 240 FPS ever. So you can just lock this one out with a 240 Hz monitor and just be happy all the time. And surprisingly, the same can be said for Warzone. So with this competitive settings, 1080p, blend of low and high details depending on specific setting, you are looking at locking in the 240 FPS basically all the time, going as high as 280 FPS very often, which is just crazy good performance for a heavy game such as Warzone. Obviously, this PC will allow you to play any kind of single-player games at any resolution, even 4K really, especially if you are willing to enable DLSS. So all in all, I'm just extremely happy about the build, and I hope you guys like it as well. Honestly, one of my favorites this year, and one of my favorites among the biggest as well. So please guys, drop a like and a sub, and I hope to see you in another video as well. Goodbye.